this evening we've got Anders Bech Jensen, who is kindly joining us from Denmark. And Anders is going to talk to us about what more we can do with the technology. I think it's specifically in a data center, but I won't say too much because obviously it's Anders' presentation and I don't want to get it incorrect. And then afterwards, John and myself will just talk about some of the green updates, what's been going on over the last 12 months, particularly in the GreenIT arena, the good, the bad, and whatever things been happening. And then when we finish, we'll just do again another discussion, a quick call of action, close the session down, and then there's some nibbles and drinks, which actually could be quite interesting because there's loads of people here today. So we might have a good session with lots of different people. So guest speaker is Anders. I've just put a quick copy of his bio that was sent to me and a synopsis of the conversation today, but I think it'd probably be better if I now hand over to Anders. Are you able to become a...
Yeah, hi everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes. Do you have your presentation? So,
well, to be quite honest, I didn't bring a presentation or PowerPoint slideshow.
Okay.
I think I'll just be going from here, and then I probably hijack and share the screen a couple of times.
Okay.
Just to use or show a couple of yeah, it is basically slides, but it's in PDF format and stuff like that.
Okay.
Good. And thank you very much for having me, or to John for inviting me to speak. My name is Anders. Yes, it's the Scandinavian Andrew, and yeah, I'm fortunate to be living in a country where the financial situation is very stable and very positive, but that also has some consequences for the environment, because Denmark is actually number 2 on a very, very naughty list in regards to creating e-waste per how do you say per person. So Norway is number 1 and Denmark is number 2. I haven't focused as much on the rest of the list because I need to do something for my country and first, and then we try to go from there. So I think I will just start, and normally I wouldn't talk about myself a lot because I don't like that. But I think what I'm going to start doing is let you guys know what I've actually been doing for the last 10 years of my career within the IT industry, because it tells a little bit about some of the influencers and how do you say, and companies and actors, which is basically part of what I do today. So I'll start from the beginning. I've actually educated within a business in a supermarket, and then I worked there for 4 or 5 years doing business and doing the school, right? After that, I was working 8-9 years in the shipping industry, also doing business. And when I'm saying the shipping industry, it's actually suppliers, buyers, purchasing equipment, provisions, etc., all around the world. Now that doesn't have much to do with IT. However, in that company, I quickly found out that I like things to be efficient. So I actually created a system. I coded a system that could actually save a lot of time and resources for the company that I worked in. I didn't think about me being a innovative or a smart person. I normally just like to speak to people and try to help. Now, fast forward, after 9 years, I needed to try something new, and by coincidence, I actually was hired with a IT broker company. Now the IT brokers, they would do buybacks of decommissioned IT hardware from either data centers, from end users, from leasing companies, etc., all around the IT industry and manufacturing companies, etc. Whenever they buy new stuff, these brokers, they would buy the equipment from the end users, etc., and refurbish the equipment and make spares or complete systems and do a resale to a different market. Or actually, it's basically the same market today. It wasn't back in the days. When I started, that's 10 years ago, the companies who bought second-hand equipment or refurbished equipment are different than it is today. Back then, it would be third-party maintenance companies. It still is. However, not many end users, big companies, would think about buying a refurbished server or a refurbished storage system or refurbished networking switches. However, they do today because of supply chain issues, and also because many companies now actually see great benefit, and as part of their sustainability track or CSR goals, to actually extend the lifetime of the equipment. Now, during the production phase of all of the equipment, it's actually where the most CO2 is being created. So that CO2 invoice, we need to stretch that as far as possible, right? And in Denmark, for example, we are fortunate to have a healthy financial situation. So we would have the, how do you say, privilege of being able to buy the new iPhones. Now, we're not only talking about data center now, but we buy the new iPhones whenever it comes out, and it's more or less every year. We don't really need it, but hey, we need the new stuff, right? And then what we do with the old stuff, many would just put it into onto the shelf and let it lie there. And that's an iPhone 12 that could easily be used otherwhere. It's the same with data center equipment. We are in a financial situation where we can buy the new stuff, or the end users or the data centers can buy the new equipment whenever Intel or AMD or Dell, HPE, etc., would bring new equipment off the shelf, and they could easily be decommissioned after 3 years or maybe 5 years, instead of the equipment, going how do you say, being stuck in the data center, put in the basement. We need that equipment to be decommissioned, to be data wiped, etc., to be handled properly, and then put into the market again, because there's a lot of companies in maybe other countries that are easily happy with servers which are refurbished and only 3 years old. The equipment is actually manufactured to last much more than 3 or 5 years. It can easily be done. And through my former job as an IT broker and refurbisher, we've actually supplied, server storage, networking equipment to, let's say, platforms, or even windmills, sea windmills, where you can't just go out and pull the equipment out each and every 3 years. That's up to 10 years, right? So there's a big industry for that, and there's a lot of skilled data center refurbish companies, these IT brokers. Actually, I need to tell you guys a secret, because I say IT brokers, but it's actually, there's 2 types. There's IT brokers. They actually doesn't provide much value to the food chain of the IT industry. They just know people who are interested in buying stuff. Then what we have, and that is the company that I used to work for example, they would be called end-of-life distributors because they actually distribute and take stock. They buy for the stock and then they sell it to the third-party maintenance companies, etc. Now, the third-party maintenance companies, just for you guys to understand what it is, and maybe you do, but I actually don't know who's actually attending the meeting. So I'll just pretend you don't. So a third-party maintenance company, those are the companies who actually specialize in handling and servicing older equipment. Now, some companies, let's say a painting company, you know, when you go and need to buy some painting for your living room, and you need some specific color, and you choose it from a color pane or something like that, how they mix the colors, that could be a software. That software has been developed maybe 15, 20 years ago, and it only runs on old equipment. The new equipment is not applicable with the old software. So these companies, which, yeah, well, they will close if they don't have this old equipment running. This just to mention one example. There's a lot of examples like this, but this is something that we all probably know. So they need to keep these servers and this storage this equipment up and running, and the normal support or service from the manufacturers like HP, Dell, etc. They've already gone end of service, right? So these companies, they actually specialize and hire and train consultants or technicians to go on site and do replacement on parts. That could be power supplies, it could be memory DIMMs, it could be anything. But they do this for a lot of companies. It's a very big market. You wouldn't, it's difficult to comprehend how big of a market it is. So these companies, they actually buy these parts from, or spare parts from the end-of-life distributors, because those are the ones who has the spare parts in stock. Now, sometimes end users or data centers, they don't like to, there's also the situation in regards to the data security. So there are also companies like ITADs, IT asset decommission companies. They specialize in safe logistics, in safe data wiping with documentation, etc. And then they would, after that, they would assist the end user or the data center to sell the equipment to the best value end-of-life distributor, or let's just call it IT brokers. Now, then we have the data centers. The data centers could own the equipment themselves, or they could be housing, like co-locations. They are basically just renting out space, renting out racks, renting out units, ensuring power, ensuring etc., etc. They don't own this equipment. However, they also need a service to reuse the equipment. Now, after 5 years with an end-of-life distributors, I got pretty good at figuring out how that market works. So then I was actually hired to a reseller, Scandinavia's largest reseller called Atea. I don't know if you've heard about them, but they're pretty big. And they are spread across Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, the Baltics, etc. So I was hired to sell the new equipment. Now, Atea are very, very, very ambitious in regards to sustainability. Now, you've probably heard about EcoVadis and how they each and every year does or how do you say? It's like
assessment.
An assessment. Who's actually the most sustainable company in the world? Now, I was in charge of the infrastructure in regards to a customer which does windmills, which is called Vestas. Yeah, and Vestas was #1 on the EcoVadis list last year in regards to sustainability. So that's very nice, and we could try and help them, right? And we did. And in regards to the IT industry, and we're talking the complete worldwide IT industry, Atea was #1 in the IT industry in EcoVadis list of sustainability. And these companies, and especially Atea, would like to stay there. So they've taken a lot of initiatives in regards to staying there. And one of them is to look at all the initiatives that can be done in regards to sustainability. But before you can do that, you simply have to understand it. And you guys probably know this better than me, because I'm actually just a data center hardware guy, right? But sustainability is a process. It's a string of initiatives. You can do a lot of things under the umbrella of sustainability. But one of those, and that's what I want to do, that's what I need to do, is I'm not good in politics, but I'm good at, doing something, making something happen. And it is calculated that it's 43% of all these initiatives, at least with Atea, 43% in regards to sustainability. That's the lowest hanging fruits, as you would say, is actually asset recovery. What I was talking about, ensuring that the electronics, whether it's data center equipment, server storage, networking, would be reused. First and foremost, try to reuse it, extend the lifetime of the equipment that we've already produced. And if that's not possible, if there is no resale value in the equipment, if no one can use it, at least then, and secondary, then we would recycle the equipment. So, and that is something that I did with Atea. I actually built a department, which is an ITAD department. So reusing and recycling data center equipment for Denmark, for Sweden, Norway, etc., etc. Now, with big companies, you need to be effective. Otherwise, no matter sustainability is a big priority, you also need to see in a company like Atea, which is on the stock, etc., etc., you need to make money. That's how it is. Otherwise, all good intentions are closed down. And I know it actually is frightening to say it out loud, and I think maybe it's the first time I did. I'm being very honest. But if we could make, good economics also with the side effect of being, pushing sustainability within the group, that would be #1, especially if we can also motivate the end users, whether it's a data center or it's these end users, and motivate them also financially, providing them with some cashback on the equipment. So instead of just letting it stand in the basement, they would actually see, okay, if we actually do something which we've already talked about is good for the sustainability and the environment and for the green IT, then yeah, let's see if we can help them with a little bit of motivation so that we can get the equipment back. Now, we went from servicing one customer at Atea, doing ITAD, 2 customers, 3 customers. At the moment, it is 500,000 units each year which is being processed now. It is also 500,000 units, which is being sold. How do you sell this equipment when it's all data wiped, when it's handled correctly in regards to logistics? It is ready to sell to the end-of-life distributors. Now, back in the days when I was I'm actually not old enough to be talking about back in the days or in the old days, but let's say 5 years ago, how I did it. Now, these ITADs or resellers, they would send out an email asking their 5 or 10 IT brokers, ask them, can you give a price on this? Right? Sending out 5 or 10 emails. Then they would receive 5 or 10 phone calls. Then they would receive 5 or 10 questions. And then, they had to give, the order to one company, but then they also have to tell 9 companies you didn't get it and spend time on that as well. It is very, very manual. It's very, very old school. It's very, very not effective. So I did, and that's where there's a little bit of story from my shipping career comes in. So 2.5 years ago, during COVID, there were no more pubs for me. There were no more football, no Premier League, no Champions League. I was getting bored and sitting and with a lot of work to do, right? So I had to use my time on something. So me and one of my buddies, we actually created a company while I was working at Atea, because Atea said, that's brilliant. You can do that only if we can use it. Okay. So what I have created is actually a company called Novitio, and it's actually a software as a service platform where customers, ITADs, resellers, etc., can log in whenever they have equipment, put it into our platform. There's an auction module, and it takes care of everything itself. So the equipment would be put into the platform, and then all of these end-of-life distributors, they would bid on it. It's not like a lengthy, ineffective auction. Each and every bidders have 2 bids. So we'll fast forward to the exciting part, and it's actually getting, to the high price, right? Again, trying to be effective. So we have at the moment 70 IT brokers or IT end-of-life distributors on the platform. Not all is trying to bid on some Cisco switches. That's why we need 70, because some is bidding on network equipment, some is good on storage, some is good on something else, right? So so that works. Now Novitio is actually a part of the process with Atea. Now, one of the great things about this is that it is anonymous. So first and foremost, those who is bidding, those who need to make the decision of doing a sales, that could be 500,000 euros or 1 million euros, they can't see who's actually bidding, meaning they can't favor someone. So there's built in some anti-corruption as well. Some companies, they have an ISO certificate 37001, which is very important for this. So basically, we have an auction module for selling the data center equipment out into this end-of-life distributor market, which sells it to the third-party maintenance market, right? And we're a little bit of an engine in the middle, or we try to be. So that's one part of what we actually do at Novitio. The second part is when we have 70 IT end-of-life distributors on board the platform, then if they put in their stock of spare parts, it will actually be a valuable purchasing tool for those third-party maintenance companies that I spoke about before. And we've built in also a module. So if a company need to replace a power supply in the server that has the painting software on it, they can actually see, okay, that's in East London. So we are searching for this part number for the power supply in East London. And then you would see the map over East London, and then you scroll out until you see a red dot, and then you can actually click on the red dot. There's your power supply. Saving time, instead of getting, you know, the normal quote from some guy, you know, in Germany. And in Germany, they have to ship it, and it's 1 or 2 days unless the customs go through it, etc. Now, this is something that we've just started working on and exploring some more. And that's going to be great for many people, and hopefully also great for us. Hey, and that's where I wanted to know. When we can do that, then the procurement teams in these third-party maintenance companies, they would actually be able to, how do you say, purchase as close as possible. Not necessarily the cheapest part, but they can actually find and prioritize to buy locally, so that we don't have to ship parts around in Europe. Now, the second thing is, as I told you, that there was 2 types of brokers. There's distributors who actually has the stock, and then there's the brokers. Now, if you are talking to brokers, or an end user is talking to a broker or reseller for that matter, if you talk to a broker, they don't have it in stock, but they need to check that it's the correct part. So they would ask a end-of-life distributor for the part. It could be shipped from Denmark. There's a lot of end-of-life distributors in Denmark. You could ship it from Denmark to Germany, and from Germany to the UK, even though you have a perfectly suited end-of-life distributor in East London or in North London, whatever, right? That is the reality. And the market of brokers, of ITADs, and even the brokers, they also try to inform that they are also good at ITAD, or they are also good at something else. Why? Because they want to make money, right? And the whole IT industry in regards to this is actually very, very complex. We try to make it more transparent. We try to make it more efficient. And to be honest, that was my main intention of creating Novitio. It was to be effective. But a positive side effect is that it's actually good for the environment. It's good for sustainability. That was, yeah, as I said, a side effect. Because I'm not like you guys, really fighting for the environment, etc. That's something that has come up over the years, but my main, how do you say, goal is being efficient, right?
Very good.
I met John in Denmark, in Copenhagen, at a event where we were talking about something, a project that we did along with the Datacentre. Now, when we have a lot of these end-of-life distributors, ITAD companies, co-location, data centers, resellers, etc., on our platform, we actually call that a community. And in that community, we can do services. So Novitio plus one of the actors, or one of the members, so to speak, could actually provide a service for some of the others in the community. So we have a cooperation with actually 2 big data centers or co-locations in Denmark. One of them is called Fusion Data Center. The other one is called Global Connect. Maybe you know them, they're pretty big. So at Global Connect, we spoke to them and they wanted to do more. They wanted to do more on sustainability and asset recovery. How can we do more, Anders? Well, as I just told you, you know, the 43% is asset recovery. Let's start, you know, doing that. That's the easy part. We just need to provide a concept how to do that. So in Copenhagen, we have, along with one of the ITADs, which is using our platform, they have 2 or 3, how do you say, secure, they call it safe boxes. It's pallets with sides and there's lid on top. So a secure, how to say, cage. So whenever, you know, Global Connect's customers need to reuse or recycle or decommission their existing equipment, they put it into these cages, and then there's instructions on a big how do you say, poster, how to do the pickup, and it's locked with yeah, it's very safe. So there's key locks, what's it called, or actually code locks. They also have an opportunity to receive GPS, visual GPS coordinates, so they can see that this is leaving from Global Connect's secured, ISO secured data center to the ITAD, and the ITAD is also ISO certified 27001 and 14001, etc. We only work with the highest certified company, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be good. So and then they actually do the process, and I'll just see if I can share this one. I hope I'm sharing.
Yep, we can see it here.
Okay, that's good. So this is actually the poster, which is it's a big poster, which is in front of these cages at Global Connect. So of course, Global Connect is looking at the energy crisis, trying to look at how they can reuse heat as well. There's a lot of initiatives, and this is just one of them. So yeah, I think I wanted to normally I would probably do like a slideshow, and I have like 50 or 60 slides. Nobody wants to see my 50 or 60 slides. I've actually found out that people are actually, you know, they actually prefer when I'm just talking and letting them know about something in a market where they might not know as much. Now I think this is more or less what how do you say? Let me just see here. New share. This is more or less what I had planned that I wanted to talk about and to inform about. And then I think the time slot was until 2015 CET, not UK time. So I think there's 10 minutes for some questions if there are any. And please, there's no stupid questions, really, because I know that it might be a handful or mouthful in regards to what were the brokers doing, why are they, etc., etc. So if anyone has a question, just let it go. If you don't like hearing yourself in a Zoom call, you can put it in the chat, and then I'm pretty sure that that one of the administrators would read it.
John, you're on mute.
It's not me. Hi. Okay, thanks for that, Anders. That was really, really interesting. So basically, your business model is recovering old equipment from wherever it is, refurbishing it if it needs refurbishing, you can sell it either as a fully complete server, or you split it down into the component parts, and basically it's a bit like breaking old cars. So you're taking windscreens and batteries and all of that stuff and then putting them away. And I think that's a great initiative, actually. It is a green IT. It is a green IT initiative.
It's not the first time that I've heard the comparison to a used car dealer breaking up parts, etc. But it's basically the same. In the car or auto industry, they also need parts. When you're a 5-year-old, I don't know, Vauxhall something, needs a new muffler or something. If somebody has a used muffler in stock, there's no reason why we should produce a new one.
Absolutely. And a lot of I remember, I am of that age actually, and I can remember in my first car buying an old Charabang and having to go to breakers yards in the UK, and basically then they used to say, well, get a set of spanners and take it out yourself. And I'm sure a lot of people hurt themselves by clambering over old cars and having them drop on them, etc. But there was some recent, or fairly old now, but there was some EU legislation that basically said we can't do this, and it was focused on cars. And I believe that there is requirements for a lot of recycled components to be actually used in the manufacture of new cars, especially steel and glass. And if you go to a breaker's yard today, it's a completely different animal to when I went there. They're almost surgical. You walk into the yard and you've got all of these, heavy duty shelving units with cars on there, and they're professional mechanics to take the stuff out, and then they put it into a warehouse, and you literally you turn up at a warehouse, and it's not like going to Halfords and you're buying a filter from wherever. You're actually buying something that's been recovered, which is great on the sustainability thing. The only thing I would say is that the EU has just released the right of repair legislation. Do you think that will have an impact on your business?
Absolutely, because earlier these third-party maintenance companies, or these companies who want to take care of the equipment, now so the OEMs, which we, by the way, also work with in regards to other matters, that's when they want to sell something new, they want to put it into a business case, getting a price or a bid for the old equipment, right? But they are actually having I'm just speaking freely now. They do have some double standards, I think, because they also want to be sustainable. They also want to promote circular economy, etc. They also want to do a lot of initiatives because, hey, that brings them forward. And at least in Denmark and the Scandinavian countries, that's actually a parameter of competition, how sustainable they are and how much carbon savings they can do on their new products. So but one in some ways they would say, yeah, we promote circular economy, however they basically don't like the second-hand market. Why? Because some customers would buy a 3-year-old server instead of buying the new one. So the sales departments from the OEMs, they would probably be pissed off. Now there's a broker or IT service company or something who provided this company with 3 old servers. They've already sold those servers, and they don't get the commission on that one at the OEM. So yeah,
that's the elephant in the room. I don't know if you can hear me, Anders.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point. I've been doing some work with some of the hyperscalers, and the policies they have around getting rid of perfectly serviceable servers after 3 years.
Yeah.
And then basically grinding the disks and everything to dust Yeah.
Yes.
Because they are worried about the data security aspects of moving servers out of the data center. Is appalling, and I think that if we're going to make an impact as a group, we've got to think internationally on this, because a lot of those policies come out of the US, where absolutely, as you're saying, the sales guys who are behind the contracts to sell the next raft of servers earn very nice commission and have no self-interest in those servers lasting any more than 3 years. I've just had a meeting myself with one company that does a lot of content delivery network business, and this exact point came up. And from a circular economy point of view, the energy required to take servers out of commission, then move them, then possibly refurbish them or take the disks out that might have the data on they don't want to get rid of, and then find another market for it. It takes a lot of energy. So my thought there is, have you looked at keeping stuff in situ and maintaining it? What we might do to reward companies that keep the old cars on the road for another 10 years rather than replace them with a new car, to use the car analogy.
If I can just, before you answer that, Anders, I do understand actually that all of the 3 main hyperscalers have extended their lives on their servers from 3 to 4 years recently.
But I've got a computer that's 7 years old. I mean, at some stage we've got to accept that maintenance schedules and keeping things as long as we possibly can, rather than having some hypothetical 4 years or whatever it is, has to we have to have that debate. I don't know the best way to do that. John, you're much more of an expert on this than I am, but
well, yeah, I mean, we are having that debate right now, actually, in certain quarters, but it's yet to go mainstream. And I think today's announcement by Meta, where they've made considerable loss, may curtail their data center growth program, which will then impact on the amount of kit that they need. And I think there's also something else that not many people in the UK are aware of, which is actually the US CHIPS Act. And what that's basically designed to do is to move chip manufacturing capability from China back to the US, because over the last 20 years or so, they've seen their share of chips globally decline from 40% of the market down to 12%. Yeah. So what that actually what that in effect means is that the US federal government has got a series of funding packages designed to do that. But if they're not allowing you to use the money in China. So what's happened recently, and this was only rumor, and I still have to check it out, was that all of the senior managers, American senior managers and lab technicians in China actually resigned en masse 2 Thursdays ago, which basically brought production in Chinese chip factories to a halt. So I think
Taiwan.
No, not Taiwan, in China. I think there's a special case for Taiwan. You'd have to look at the CHIPS Act in more detail to find it. Yeah. But I think that's going to impact definitely on the supply chain. And we've already had the supply chain issue from pandemic. And I think the CHIPS Act is going to be another restriction on chips, which will then impact almost every industry that's using chips. Which actually
slow down the whole production of chips, won't it, if they're all designing. So
absolutely, but it's going to help Anders out, because Anders will be able to pick up all this old kit and maybe knock out the chips.
I suppose my point though is that looking at it from a circular economy point of view, what you want to do is keep reuse as high as possible.
Yes.
So taking a server and extending its life in situ, not moving it, not trying to replace it or break it up. I mean, there's an aspect of breaking it up, other bits breaking up, so you can replace some bits in that, thinking of cars. But I'm just wondering, Anders, what, what's your thinking in terms of rather than taking them out of the data center, leaving them in situ, and even providing a service back to a new community of users that might use that data in service?
The idea is very good, and it all depends on workload, compute workload. The applications and the software today is getting more and more demanding, and needs more and more power. And more power means better power supplies, meaning better cooling, meaning blah blah blah. So maybe some of these hyperscalers, they can't go with the old kit. Maybe they need more than, and then you also do, and that's actually something that we're working with as well. We're doing energy efficiency reports on data centers. We have a partner who does that, and I know there's some good guys in the UK as well doing that, especially on looking at two different kinds of servers with different kind of CPUs, etc. So you can actually do some analysis on it. And these hyperscalers, they definitely do. And if they don't, just send them to me, because then we can actually figure out the most energy efficient way of doing their purchases, or not keeping some kit alive for more years. Now, if we're talking HPE, for example, then some of the hyperscalers, they might have 80%, which is a newer generation, but they would still probably have 20% of their servers, which is maybe 4 years old, for example, and then they would have like a running shift of equipment. And in regards to your question, yes, if looking at the sustainability and circular economy part, it would be nice to extend the lifetime of the equipment, especially on site. Absolutely, but there's just many situations where you can't do it, or you can't do it because workload and increasing performance demand.
So I've got a take on that one. So when I used to work for I was with IT hardware seller. One of the interesting things is they would only guarantee like a 3-year warranty against the products, after which they wouldn't warranty them anymore. And that was a kind of way of driving the fact that you'd have to swap servers and equipment out of the data centers, because there was the risk that it wouldn't function anymore. I guess there's two elements. One element is that we, the enterprise architects, solution designers, need to design failure into everything. So if components fail, it doesn't matter. I guess the other one is, how do you reassure the end users that they have a degree of warranty, that the equipment that's being remanufactured will be supported and maintained over the period that the people want to run it for?
They don't. That's the quick answer. But the thing is, like you said you were at a IT hardware reseller, right?
So I used to work for IBM, the actual manufacturing hardware division.
Yes, and that's correct. Earlier, it was probably 3 years warranty or support, but nowadays you can actually choose. IBM, for example, you can choose whether you want 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years support, and within the support, of course, you have to pay for it. But within that support period, if you have a hardware component breaking down or malfunctioning, they would send you a new one, including a consultant to install the component. And after the 5 years, if you want to extend the lifetime, you can actually contact IBM or HPE or Dell to buy a further care package. The only problem, and back to the elephant, by the way, when we are getting to year 5, the support prices are extremely high. from the manufacturers, the OEMs. Why? Because they want to motivate you to buy some new stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Back to the elephant.
So
and that is actually why there's a big market for the IT maintenance. I'm pretty sure I'm sharing my screen. And if you're getting dizzy on all of these packages going around the world, don't worry, it will go away. Or at least if Novitio is successful, it will go away. But the IT maintenance and third-party maintenance companies, they actually offer the support, including spare parts, etc. When your official OEM support is actually over, whether it's 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, and that's why there's a big market for that. And back to what John said, the right to repair, which have actually been on the table or on the works for many years. Previously, the OEMs would not allow these maintenance companies to have access to critical software updates. And that's not good, because then you're actually forced to buy the support, the expensive support from the OEMs, because then, well, if you can't have critical upgrades, then it's no good, especially if you run your production IT on these servers or equipment. Now, with the right of repair, the OEMs have to release critical upgrades to the end users, to the customers. So they don't have monopoly on that one anymore. So back to John's question, I think it will be a massive impact. What we also see from the OEMs, and we don't, it sounds like I don't like those guys. Well, they produce and manufacture equipment that actually makes everything run the world at the moment, right? IT, without IT, well, we wouldn't have this meeting, would we? Or at least I would not be sitting in Denmark, then I would be sitting in London. Anyway, so they're actually doing a lot of good things, like I said. So, for example, in regards to repair, the manufacturers of laptops, for example, which uses glue to glue everything together, that's gonna be gone. Now it's small screws, so it's easier to repair and replace, things, so that we can extend the lifetime on the equipment. It's just, yeah. Actually, while I remember, Dr. Shibuner actually had a question. Is there any training giving to new computer brokers? Yes, absolutely. It's actually free of charge for any broker or end-of-life distributor to be part of the platform. If they gain business, then there's a commission to the platform. That is how I get my salary. We spoke to all of these brokers and all the other parties, ITADs, etc., and they found that we should be taking 10% commission. It's just like an auction. If you buy something at an auction, there's also a commission. But what we said was, we don't want to take 10%. We want to take 5%. And don't get me wrong. I do like making money. That's what I'm educated in, and we all want more money. That equals freedom for me. And I do like my family, which I also need to take care of, etc. However, it is very, very important that it is not our commission that will shut down the deal, that will be a stumbling block in regards to reusing equipment. So we know that if we have a too high commission, if the ITAD have a too high commission, etc., it will simply break down the deal, and then the end user would say it's not worth it. Like you said, it does take a little bit of time and effort to decommission equipment. So we need to make it efficient. And in regards to how we do things is we want to go for volume. and then 5% when we have the right volume is well sufficient for us. Our goal is actually first is to take care of our salaries so that we go break even in a year. And if we make or do a good how do you say financial year next year, we will be starting to how do you say do charities. We have 3 or 4 different charities in mind, also in regards to sustainability and stuff like that. Don't worry, it's not greenwashing. I know what that is and how to dodge that bullet. We want to put some money where it's actually gonna do some good. So yeah. So if anyone has more questions, feel free to contact me and Dr. Shiboner. If you have a broker company, then reach out, or if you know somebody, especially also ITAT brokers, IT maintenance, etc. I'll be happy to let people know how they can actually gain some value using our platform or our services.
Okay, great.
I have a question for Anders, just a quick one.
Yes.
Hi, Anders, it's Santana Luis here. I just wanted to ask you in terms of I like your idea and the concept you're using, but in terms of all the IT equipment, as you know, we have IT security in mind. So in terms of BIOS levels and stuff like that for all the equipment, what is your model for the IT maintenance that you've got on your platform? How are they keeping up to date with keeping the BIOS levels in sync with whatever software the organization or end user is planning to run?
I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest.
So like you can't use servers in data centers because they have to comply to certain security standards. Yeah. So is your market mainly looking at not critical data centers, or servers that don't comply to strict security standards? Because obviously you have to update the BIOS and the patches on certain hardware.
Yes, precisely. It's very different. The hyperscalers, for example, and banks or financial institutions, those are definitely companies who go only by the OEMs, follow the support tracks, etc., and change the equipment after these 3 to 5 years, etc. And they don't necessarily go for a second-hand or refurbished server or storage, etc. They might once in a while, and especially in these times where supply chain is tricky and there's a lot of lead time on equipment, if they need extra capacity and they can't get it through the normal channels, that meaning through a reseller, distributor and the OEM, then they have to go into a different market. There's simply not another option for them. However, if they are big, very big, then I'm pretty sure that the OEMs will be able to figure something out. But then there's some smaller companies or end users which might not have the same, how do you say, the same standards in regards to their policies. Some would actually have, how do you say, they would have test environments, right? I know data centers where they have a complete replica data center, only in a generation older than the one they have. So if the one data center breaks down or something, they can actually do the workloads on the secondary data center equipment.
Yeah, it's some business continuity or disaster recovery site.
Precisely. And again, a lot of companies they use third-party maintenance companies and refurbished equipment in test environments. Now, one thing I actually forgot to say is that this is GreenIT, and it's not only data centers, but it was the topic of today's pitch, right, and discussion. But what we've actually done is we've done data centers. We do that, we offer that, but what we also do is devices, so laptops, mobile phones, tablets. We've just included also retail equipment. So that means, POS equipment, like when you go into, the supermarket, cash registers, the barcode scanners, the barcode printers, etc. We've also included, and this is very new, but we've included also medical equipment. So scanners, mammography units, etc. CT scanners. There's a complete reused market for that as well, and it's actually something that in Denmark we're doing a lot. So when the big hospitals are changing equipment, we can actually reuse this equipment. Now there was during the pandemic, there was actually what were they called when respirators? Mm-hmm. There was a very big market for respirators at that point. I know it's terrible to think about, but hey, instead of those, let's say 500 or 1,000 old respirators, being scrapped, putting on the dump or something, they have actually probably saved lives now. So I'm not trying to sugarcoat the business, but that's actually a pretty good, how do you say, thing that happened. So medical equipment we can also do, and then we're working on modern workspace as well, meaning your screen, the keyboards, printers, etc. So we want to reuse as much as we can because it's a good idea.
Great. Good. Well, thank you very much, Anders, for that. It's gone over a little bit, but it's only John and myself talking, so I guess people have heard our stories a few times now. But thank you. It's been really useful, and again, thank you very much for giving your time today. Let me get back to here. Let's go. 2, 3. So just the final bit of today is John and myself is just going to go through basically the big green things that have been happening over the last 12 months, areas of focus, of just a sort of quick synopsis of all things green of 2022. So one of the big things that kind of started off early on this year, and this was really kicked off by a government initiative, is around making your procurement process more sustainable. Now, one of the interesting things, particularly from ICT, is that what we've seen is a big change in the way that ICT services are consumed. So at the millennium, end of the 90s, start of this millennium, most IT services were being delivered by individual firms from their individual data centers. Over time, this has completely shifted. So now a lot more services being delivered through cloud, through the colo, through the data center service providers. And this is a big transition, and it's really sort of reflecting what people are seeing in the market, but it does mean that it's now a little more complicated in terms of actually trying to understand your carbon usage. And the other big thing that's come along is obviously Scope 3, so reporting the carbon usage of your supply chain. Where is my carbon sitting? And so one of the challenges of an organisation is that if you're starting off now and you want to procure services from a third party, how do you know whether this third party is really sustainable? How do you know if they can deliver against what it is as wanted? And so one of the things that the government has released around March time was the Digital Data and Technology Playbook. What this is really trying to do is help people who are in the procurement process to try and understand whether the third parties that they're going to be contracting with are sustainable, as well as all the other factors that the procurement department look at. And so one of the interesting things here is, it's about putting some criteria, a framework down to say, does this vendor have a carbon reduction plan? Are they realistically going to hit net zero by 2050? And so, previously procurement be looking at quality, price, security, but now within the procurement process, there really needs to be an element which is about sustainability. Are these organizations really going to be sustainable? And one of the big problems with cloud is that once you've signed your cloud contract, you're effectively kind of limited on the amount of flexibility you have. You're kind of stuck within that contractual framework, and you can't really then go back to the cloud vendor and say, oh, by the way, can you add some additional information? Can you make a change to my product? So it becomes much more important that sustainability is actually part of the ongoing procurement process, because it gets much more difficult to actually change it later on. And I think that's really key. So what we want to do, and what some of the conversations we've been having with organizations like Deloitte this year, which is how can we go to work with firms in terms of defining their processes and defining how they go about consuming their services, so that they can include the information they need for scope 3. So if they're consuming the service, they understand what the carbon footprint associated with that service is, whether that is actually a genuine carbon footprint or whether it's a little degree of greenwashing. And so all of these questions now need to be understood and asked way earlier in the process of a program of work, earlier in the process of how you actually consume your services. So you need to understand the sustainability element right at the beginning rather than later on. One of the things that is really useful, and this is clear, is that to understand whether an organisation is sustainable, really, they can say they are, and there's lots of examples of organisations who claim to be sustainable, but actually, they're not, or they have certifications which aren't real certifications. So it's really about trying to understand what accreditations they've met, and are these accreditations valuable? So obviously we've got the EU Code of Conduct, one of John's here. So a good example of understanding how sustainable the data center is. We've got the BREEAM standards here. We've obviously got some of the US standards in terms of understanding whether the services are sustainable and what level of service they meet. We're going to have, all of these here. ISO. I mean, ISO standards been around a long time, but it's a good benchmark. And then finally, and not forgetting our CEDA, the Certification of Energy Efficiency Data Center. Now, this is a good example of some of the things that we would like to do going forward, which is CEDA is the certification that was built from the BCS and now is expanded out of the BCS into the commercial world. And this is a real success story. And if BCS Green is going to carry on, we want more CEDAs. We want to come and find the next CEDA, because this is what we should be doing, and we should be helping organisations understand the quality of the service they're getting, because the service provider they're consuming these services from have met a certain criteria, and that criteria is evaluated by an external third party. So obviously the other big one is carbon reporting scope 3. So scope 3 emissions, it's a bit more complicated because it's effectively the emissions of your supply chain. And when you're an ICT consumer, it's really, again, with the procurement process, it's difficult to understand where your carbon is. Now, fortunately, we asked this question. I remember John and myself, we asked this question maybe 5 or 6 years ago to the big service cloud providers, the Googles, the Amazons, and they were told, we were basically told to go away. We're not going to tell you what the carbon usage of the service is. But in reality, scope 3 has changed all of that, because they will actually have to start publishing the carbon element of the service you're consuming. And actually, when you sit down and think about it, it probably wasn't have been that difficult. Amazon can tell you every megabyte of data you're using. They can tell you every CPU cycle and every megabit of data that you're consuming in terms of the network. But what they said is they couldn't tell you how much carbon that was generating. Well, that's obviously, if they can get that level of granularity to bill you exactly what you're using, they can clearly find out or extrapolate from there exactly how much carbon is being used as well. And I think the good thing about Scope 3 is it has really pushed the problem to the forefront, and actually service providers are going to need to start publishing this. But for some of them, it might be a little challenging. And again, something that we as the BCS and we as the Green organisation need to think about is how can we help organisations to A, understand what their carbon usage is, and B, to help them ask the questions of their suppliers in terms of the carbon usage, but also to help organisations who are maybe not necessarily the Amazons and the Googles, some of the service providers, the data centres, the colos, how can we help these people to actually start publishing some of their data in terms of how much energy is being used within each component of their data centre. The other thing, and this is very, very key, is that we find ourselves in a bit of a problematic situation right now. And one of the things that is spoken about a lot, and whenever we go to events and there's someone from the government there, they're really interested in defining what what is a green workforce going to look like. And so there is an opportunity here that some of the numbers bouncing around. I'm a bit skeptical of these numbers. I have no idea how someone calculates it, but there's something that's saying that to reach net zero by 2050 is going to cost an extra 3.5 trillion a year. I don't think that's correct. I think it was 3.5 trillion was a whole lot. But in summary, it's going to take a lot of effort and resource to get us to net zero. There's going to be a big degree of economic output coming from the transition to net zero. And it's going to cover every profession. You look at a house now and you've got some of the services in there, but if you're going to need to have a smart house because it's affecting supply of sustainable energy, but also demand of energy, well, then someone's going to need to go in there and start fitting an enterprise services layer. Someone's going to need to fit all the smart technologies. And so effectively we're saying, right, well, we're picking up from the apprentice. The apprentice, the person who doesn't necessarily want to go to university but needs to understand and get vocational practical skills. There will be a whole raft of different job types out there, specifically around sustainability, which will help which becomes a career, which will support these people for the duration of their career. Similarly, in terms of understanding whether people meet the criteria, there's a whole number of assessments. There's a whole number of consultancy pieces to help organisations achieve their net zero commitments. And I think it's going to be challenging, especially in the small and medium sector, where the firm isn't necessarily big enough to actually have their own sustainability officer, to actually have the resources to transition. Really, how are we going to help these firms to get to net zero? What are the kind of services that we need to provide? What is the kind of assessment? What is the kind of support these companies need? And therefore, what are the roles in terms of the job type and the job skills and the job set that are needed to make the new green workforce? And then, obviously, in the back of the minds of politicians, is they're thinking to themselves, well, we can make the UK a centre for green skills in the same way that the UK has become a centre for digital platforms. That's an opportunity for us to deal with some of our unemployment issues. I mean, I guess as we transition away from a carbon economy, there are going to be people who need to reskill and retrain into a low carbon economy. And so trying to grow this concept of the green jobs market, trying to build out green skills is going to allow people to retrain, but it's also going to provide a way of growing. And, to be honest, we've got 2 years until the next general election. So I think that...
Hope not.
Well, you think it's going to be less? Okay. Theoretically, there's 2 years till the next general election. So there's quite a small window of opportunity. I mean, okay. So in our current arena, we need to get something in the next 3 months then, John. Until the next one. So it's quite an important area, but it's an area where there's lots of questions being asked, and people are going to want answers very quickly, because the way that politics seems to be moving around now, things change very quickly, and there's definitely an area of focus, but it's how do we tackle it? But not necessarily, but how do the wider market think about how we're gearing up to decarbonisation, we're gearing up to net zero, we're gearing up to 2050, but if you're a 16-year-old coming in now, by the time 2050 rolls around, that's your, you pretty much set yourself up for a career. You'll be reaching the end of your career sometime around then. So this is an opportunity, but what really needs to be defined is what are these roles? How do people become skilled in them? What are the skills they need? Who's going to define the training? Who's going to define the education path that is needed? And who's really going to help us achieve these goals by actually creating the new skills base? One other thing I couldn't help. So the other thing as well is customer relation management. So there's a company, they're in the UK, Zando. They're this big online retailer. They sell clothes, they sell sports gear, they sell all sorts of things. And they came up with this wonderful thing where you could understand what the carbon footprint of each of the things you were buying, and you could make a sustainable truth. Unfortunately, it turns out that there was no actual empirical evidence behind how this thing worked, and they got caught out for the fact that their sustainable element on their digital platform, where you could calculate how sustainable your products were, wasn't entirely correct, and it caused them a big challenge. And so greenwashing is key. It's easy, and I guess some companies even just kind of sleepwalk into greenwashing. They believe their own marketing, they believe they are sustainable when they're not, and when they get caught out with a company like Zalando, it's bad for their image. It's bad for their company, and I think that they started off with the idea. It was a good idea. They thought it was going to be a good thing, but it didn't quite work. And I think that greenwashing is something where people got to be really careful. And there's some new legislation coming out to say, actually, if you get caught greenwashing, you can get prosecuted. So being careful about substantiating your sustainability claims is probably key. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a bit of trouble. Now, the other thing, we're all going electric. Now, I was interestingly listening to Joe Biden the other day saying that the average electric car uses 3,000 chips. So I'm hoping that this second market. So John, your broker's yard of the future will be basically a broker's yard selling electrical equipment. So actually, in the same way that we're reselling servers, we're probably going to need to do the same thing with electric vehicles now, because they are basically big computers on wheels, aren't they?
No, what's going to happen, Alex, unfortunately, is there's going to be scavengers scavenging across a desolate wasteland, trying to find bits of old tech that will work.
You've been watching Mad Max.
Luckily, most of us will be dead and buried by then.
Well, that's one pathway. There'll be a different pathway which says, in exactly the same way that Anders is saying with the reuse recycle for computers, it's going to be a completely different thing. And I took my car to get something fixed on it, and my mechanic says that he's done. As soon as electric cars turn up, he's retiring, because he can't retrain himself. So again, that's a whole different ballgame, which is your mechanic is not going to be the person who can repair these things. And they will break, and things will need to be repaired, but they're a very different proposition to the existing car, and they have a very different proposition in terms of recycling and reusing. And I was watching someone doing a teardown on a Tesla, and I was just amazed by where the processed chips were in the motors, they were in the engines, they were in every bit of the car when they were taking it to pieces. In the battery, there was just microprocessors everywhere. And all of these things need to be recycled, reused, but they also need to be repaired as well. So there's going to be a lot of value in how we actually deal with this whole complete new problem that electric vehicles are going to present to us.
And also the housing.
housing.
Yes, because as you, if you put your technology into houses to make sure they stay as green as possible,
Yep.
that's all going to be have to be updated to the whole housing stock.
Yeah. So it's future proofing it. So you're right. So a smart house will have a heat. It won't have a gas boiler. Right now, the technology they have is air source and ground source heat pumps, but they function differently, and so you need a mechanical heat recovery system in there as well.
Yeah, but then you've got to deal with blocks of flats. You've got stacks of properties that the heat pumps don't work. Anything with massive infrastructure will stop the heat pump working. And who's going to maintain it? The whole housing stock every 5 years go around, or is it a continuous process of renewal? All the way through the housing stock again and again and again, like you paint the house occasionally. You're going to have to update all the electronics. So how is it going to be sustainable price-wise? What's it going to cost?
I think
It's always about cost, especially for the year.
it's about definitely to certainly be future-proofing what we have as well. Now, I'm quite clear that we're running out of time now, so I'm going to skip e-waste. We've spoken about that as well. I'm going to skip green pointers, and I'm going to give John the opportunity to finish off with his quick synopsis of fear and loathing in the data center sector. Lots of acts about impending EU legislation, the cost of energy. So, here, John.
Okay, thanks. Can everybody see that screen?
Yep.
Yep, great. Okay, fear and loathing in the data center sector. I came up with that after attending an event last week, Data Center Dynamics, which is probably the largest data center event in the UK, which is more conference-based rather than showroom-based. But we do have fear, and the fear is energy costs and sustainability. Okay, and I'll cover that now. Energy in January was 17 pence per kilowatt. Today, it's 86 pence a kilowatt. This means that data center energy consumption costs is quadrupled in less than 10 months. There is a lot of people really, really worried about where this is going. 86 pence is almost unsustainable for smaller organizations who will have seen their energy bills in their server rooms rise by, as I said, 400%, and then sustainability. So I often ask these questions on my slides. How much do data centers use across the UK for this particular question? And my answer is usually we don't know, because we don't. But we do know that in the UK, in the last climate change agreement reporting period, data centers use 12 terawatt hours. In the 2-year period, so 6 terawatt hours a year. And that's itself is quite interesting, because that's a lot higher than the previous reporting period. And it's probably doesn't reflect all of the data centers in the UK. So that actually 12 terawatt hours accounts for about 4% of the UK total grid, which is a lot higher also than what has been said by the International Energy Agency and a lot of the estimates of energy use globally. So if in the UK we're at 4%, I think we can safely say they're actually using a little bit more than what we think. And earlier this year, the Boardstep Institute developed this graph, and they estimate it in 2022 as being around about 80 terawatt hours in Europe, and that it could potentially double to 160. It could rise a little bit, 100. It could remain kind of static, or it could reduce. I have no comment on that. It's never going to get up to here, because I think the natural barriers of grid infrastructure is going to stop that happening. The loathing in the data center, so the fear is of energy cost prices rising, and also the forthcoming sustainability stuff, which could mean access to critical raw materials. The loathing is data center legislation that's going to come out from the EU. And this is actually already in play. The Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, which was launched to great fanfare in January 21 during the pandemic, which was supposed to be a self-regulation initiative, has therefore spectacularly failed.
Self-regulation.
Spectacularly failed because there is regulation. I spoke to the chairman of the event of the pact last week, and he was kind of quite ambivalent, I would say, but he was still maintaining that the pact set the targets and the code of conduct was the mechanism to get there. He clearly doesn't understand where the code and the rest of the standards are going. We've got the iMasons Climate Accord, and that was kind of launched quite spectacularly at the data center event in Monaco earlier this year. But who launched it never bothered to speak to the iMason Sustainability Committee. So it hasn't gone down very well. And now we're left picking up their pieces. So they've made all these great statements, but there's nobody actually doing any work. So this EU legislation was talking about, it comprises of the taxonomy regulations, which is effectively, it's focused on over 11,000 large EU businesses. And it's to basically make them really think about what they do and how they're going to do it, and whether or not they're going to do it in an energy efficient and sustainable manner. And as part of the taxonomy, they released something called the Taxonomy Compass. The Taxonomy Compass specifically targets data centers and talks about they must be independently audited every 3 years to the EU Code of Conduct or its equivalent in the standard. That has caused considerable angst within not only the data center sector, but also the certifying bodies who did not believe that the Code of Conduct was in an auditable state. So I've been working since May the 1st on developing a auditable EU version of the EU Code of Conduct. That work's been complete. It's been sent over to the Joint Research Centre for their steering committee review. I received the comments back yesterday. There were some minor amendments, and I will be having a further meeting with my colleagues on the TIC Council meeting drafting group tomorrow. It's also likely that the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is actually for medium companies, so basically the taxonomy is everybody above 500 employees, and the reporting directive is everybody below 500 employees and includes small SMEs. You may have also seen something about the revised energy efficiency directive. Now, this actually has 4 distinct reporting requirements for data centers, but because most of the people involved in the EU in data centers are kind of knowledgeable about all 3, what we've effectively done is we've preempted the energy efficiency directive by making sure that the metrics that are required are covered in the taxonomy regulations. So as I said, everything points to the EU Code of Conduct for data center energy efficiency. And I think one of the things that I should mention is that actually the Code of Conduct is a BCS invention. You know, in 2007, it was developed with DEFRA and the EU JRC. So, you know, we have shaped European policy with data center result. And I remember speaking to one of the architects of that. And I said to him, you know, is there ever going to be any legislation for data centers? And he said, oh, yes. He says, this document is the prelude to a whole raft of data center legislation. And he wasn't wrong. It has taken 12 years to get there, though, which sometimes can show you how difficult it is to get legislation through not only our parliament, but also other parliaments. So the taxonomy, this is basically 3 slides. So it's to meet the energy and climate targets for 2030. Vital, we direct investments to sustainable projects. The pandemic has reinforced the need to redirect money toward make our economies, businesses and societies, particularly health systems, more resilient and against climate and environmental shocks. And then they've created this common language, the taxonomy. So the taxonomy, as I mentioned earlier, does mention the Code of Conduct. it will be based on the expected best practices and those at level 5, which means that it's 106 plus the ISO IEC 30134, or if you prefer the EN 5600-4 KPIs, which is power utilization effectiveness, renewable energy factor. This is IT energy efficiency for server, IT energy utilization, energy reuse factor, cooling efficiency ratio, carbon utilization efficiency, and water utilization efficiency. So there is nowhere to hide, right? These metrics are going to be very interesting because currently at the moment, people only report PUE. So they're going to have to start reporting all of them. And as I said, independent audit every 3 years, which is great news for me as an independent auditor. And we've been working with the TIC Council. And as I said, we've got the meeting coming tomorrow, and it's likely that the elements will cascade through the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive. So if you run a data center in Europe or in the UK, because the taxonomy knows no boundary, if your organization has European personnel or it's funded by Europeans, you will have to comply with the taxonomy. Don't panic, for starters. Don't panic, Mr. Mannering. Get up to speed with the taxonomy regulations. Conduct an energy or code of conduct review in your data center or for your data center customers. Take a training course on the EU Code of Conduct. I've got another side hustle going on at the moment, which is the National Data Center Academy, which we're currently seeking funding for from the West Midlands Combined Authority Innovation Accelerator. But we can do pop-ups, so we can actually go to your site and deliver training on your site. You should be taking on an external code of conduct specialist consultant to review and advise. I might be that man. Start calculating your KPIs, your key performance indicators, which I've just mentioned. Consider adding them to your BMS, EMS, or DSIM dashboard. There will be a cost, but you could also save, budget for around 20, 50K per annum, and prepare for audit. And again, don't panic, right? This will happen, but there will be some leeway, I'd imagine. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So we've overrun a little bit, but I think we should be okay. So if there's any other, we do have a discussion point, but I think we've run out of time a bit. So if anyone's on the call has any key things they want to add, raise your hand, say hello. If not, I think we should reach the point where just thank everyone for coming. Hopefully it's been insightful, useful. It's good we've come back here again, so let's try and do some more events, and hopefully I will catch up with you all soon.